The handle's imprinted. Whosoever is carrying Thor's fingerprints is, I think, the literal translation.
Yes, well, that's a very interesting theory. I have a simpler one. You're all not worthy.
How could you be worthy? You're all puppets, tangled in strings.
I want to talk about Ultron, because I think what makes a villain compelling is if we can relate to them ourselves.
Yes.
And do you feel like he's that outward manifestation of Tony's shadow arrogance, the side of him that thinks he knows best above anyone?
Well, I mean, yeah. Look, the first thing that comes online is just those survival instincts, and then the ego follows shortly therein. So I'd have to ask Joss. That's a really smart question. I'm sure he's some shadow of Tony's ambition.
Yeah.
You never expect your own brainchild to decide that you're what needs to be exterminated.
Ultron he's many things, but the most important thing he is not entirely wrong. He has a valid point to make. He also has the inability to control his feelings about that and where that's going to take him, and which I relate to both. I relate to what he's articulating about how the Avengers are on some levels a toxic concept, and then I also relate to his inability to understand himself as intelligent as he is.
I think, when Tony Stark and Bruce Banner first sort of conceived of this thing or program or whatever it was, it had a very specific and rather narrow parameter for what it was going to be. And then when it sort of took control of itself, it just broadened and the horizon became limitless. And I think his perception of the world reflects that, and certainly his perception of the Avengers reflects that, because he's seeing them. Because obviously, if he was entirely created by them, then he'd simply see the world through the prism of their view. Sure. But he doesn't, and most importantly, what he sees is their juxtaposition to the world, and perceives them as being a big part of the problem.
There's something about when you see that character, and especially the way that James plays him, it's like this very kind of, there was something very almost kind of Shakespearean about him. Yeah, he's in his delivery, and then also this kind of this idea that he has, this sort of sense of his own self, and like the gravity of his presence is so sort of booming and overwhelming and terrifying, but also like admirable. And I think that Tony in his like super ego has that quality. You know what I mean? I think so certainly too. A part. So maybe he's Tony's super ego. I would say he's out of control.
Which nobody's super ego should really be out in the world at all, but yours
It is if you're psychotic, though.
Yes, then it should be locked away. Yes, it shouldn't have unlimited power.
I think that the reason that he's so terrifying is that we live in a day and age where like everything is electrical, everything is technological, and this is somebody who controls that. He controls everything. He controls everything that has an outlet or needs an outlet, and that's a really scary thing to affect the whole world, not just locating it in one city. I mean, it's global.
So he kind of points out how powerless we are to that technology.
I think a more upstream thing is in cinema in general, like all heroes need to be flawed, and all these heroes have flaws, and all villains need to be right, almost have some sort of sympathy or empathy that the audience feels for the villain. And in this movie, the themes that really Ultron is talking about are not that far off base. Sometimes they're a little cockeyed, and what he wants to kind of do with his sort of ideas, but the generalness of villains sort of verve, it shouldn't be that far off base.
Listen, any debate, no matter political, theological. There's going to be people who have kind of an absolute approach to things. Kind of this kind of blanket statement of this is the way to do things, and it's, in theory, it makes sense, but the consequence, the collateral damage kind of affects people. There's a lack of compassion in that blanket way of thinking. But there are people who think that way in every debate, and like I said, it does kind of make sense at times. So I think Ultron is kind of that blanket statement where, truthfully, if he did wipe everyone out, you would go back to neutral, and the planet may be more peaceful and happy, but the collateral damage would be catastrophic.
That's the best you can do!